months. Can you imagine that? Crying months. And it's just that she's such a special person to be around. And now that she's retired, actually she uses her special powers on teaching disabled children, on giving back to community. So I think she's one of those rare persons that we really should learn about. And today she is here to talk about us on empathy. And there's been saying that some persons are just angels in disguise. Please welcome with me our first keynote speaker to ScanAgile online events, Jennifer Fawcett. Jennifer, please. Jennifer, can you join us to the stage, please? Yay!
Hey,
hello, Jennifer.
That was a beautiful introduction. Thank you. I couldn't have written that myself.
Can you see your slides?
Yeah,
please?
Let's try. How's that?
Not visible.
Okay. Let me try one more time. Share screen. Okay, now let's try.
Okay, now we see those. Okay, good. So have fun.
Okay, hey Helsinki, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here this morning. Actually, this morning here in Colorado, where the sun is just coming up. So in September, as Marit mentioned, I retired, and here I am with Dean. He's one of my most influential and empathetic leaders in my career. So since I've retired, it's given me the time and space to reflect on my life and what's happened and how some of the experiences have shaped me. So I wanted to share some of the most early impactful times of my life. When I was 14, the boy I had a deep crush on was killed in a motorcycle accident. He was unintentionally hit by an oncoming car. I sobbed in my bedroom for months. Let's see, when I was 21, my deepest friend, my older brother, committed suicide. Recovering from that loss took years, if ever I've recovered, I don't know. I've lost all my grandparents, my mother, my father. I've been through 2 divorces, lost my dear friend to pancreatic cancer only 9 weeks after she was diagnosed just a few years ago. And on the flip side, I have had the honor of being next to some of these dear souls during their passings. I feel deeply for those I've loved and all around me, almost too deeply to the point of it being somewhat detrimental to my own health. So the learnings that are engraved in my now aged DNA start with impermanence. And then they lead to, what can I do to help people? I think this has enabled the connection of empathy in myself, and this is what we're here to talk about. So what, if anything, does this have to do with agility? And in particular, this talk, we're here to talk about the science of empathy, practical ways to foster innovation. Well, empathy is the single most misunderstood characteristic of human nature, but it's also one of the most powerful characteristics from an Agile perspective, and in particular, a customer-centric mindset. Now, here's why it's not easily understood. It's a construct of multiple components, each of which is associated with its own brain network. And since the brain is still not thoroughly understood, neither is empathy. But recent research suggests that the neural circuitry is key to understanding empathy and how it evolves in our own brains. So I've introduced you to some of my life-shaping experiences, but more importantly, why should you care? Well, here's some of my real-time experiences with empathy, and maybe you can relate or feel them as well. I have a habit of overly taking on other people's feelings, their thoughts and experiences without really wanting to, and then separating them from my own. So here's some examples. I can read a mood in a person or the room by just being there. I'm a pretty good listener, but I also get my feelings hurt easily. That said, I've grown some thick skin over the years. I'm an introvert, and I know you can all relate to this, and I follow my intuition more than not. And if something doesn't feel good intuitively, I'll tend to shy away. And I need time alone to flourish. Now, there's more, but I'm going to save that for you later. Now, these traits are powerful from an Agile coaching perspective and leadership perspective, but they're also extremely exhausting. After every large-scale transformation I've been involved with, and there's been many, Mart's talked about a few, as coaches, we go in and we come out. I go down and I need time off. I often get sick, but I walk away with the most amazing and deep relationships with my clients, and some of whom are part of my personal social network. So the premise for this talk is that empathy is the root enabler for innovation. And it's also the key driver behind design thinking. It's a critical neurological behavior that we should all attempt to connect with, or in my case, manage, if we truly want to continue to build products and services that people love. And we can use empathy and design thinking to become more socially responsible in our enterprise through having a global, holistic, empathetic view of our planet and the amazing gifts that it provides for us to thrive. So let's start with the statement around empathy being the root enabler for innovation, and it starts with design thinking. So according to who you follow or research, there's a 4 or 5 or 6 stage process to organize your data to deliver something of value. And these stages use divergent and convergent ideation patterns to continue to validate or invalidate the value delivered. And the process starts with empathy. It's also known as the discover phase. Moves into define, develop, and then delivering that value. But the reality is, as the Scaled Agile framework is showing you here, it's highly iterative as we learn along the way. So here's the challenge. How do we get all of our people on board with empathy to fuel design thinking, and more importantly, truly using customer centricity to optimize innovation to better meet our customers' needs? So let's close your eyes for a moment and take a moment to breathe on that. How do we get our people on board with empathy? Okay, you can open your eyes. One key aspect is agency. Let's look at the philosophy of agency. Agency is one of the most important elements in developing empathetic thinking. It's the ability to think and act using cognitive reasoning across the brain, the mind, and relationship. In other words, it's your personal autopilot. Agency is deeply rooted in 2 primary aspects of the human condition. One is the level of ability an individual has to interact in an authentic fashion with other people. That's empathy with others, as well as a deep knowing of yourself. In other words, how well you know yourself, your own behavior, and your own actions. Well, why is that important? Well, there's a few benefits, and I'm going to pull on a few that relate directly to this talk. By knowing yourself, you're empowered to see things that you were once blind to. For example, your people, your social networks, and your enterprise. And this has been quite the evolution for myself. In the 1990s, I was a product manager, and I can honestly tell you that I hadn't connected with agency. My team viewed me as a type A personality, very aggressive, and I was driven by getting my product to market. Now, that egocentric behavior blinded me from the people and the teams that were supporting me in getting that value out the door. Now, one of my colleagues and peers, Chuck Pazesky, writes, how do we develop agency in our leaders and our people to sense the circumstance, reflect, learn, and figure out what the right thing to do is? Now, a lot of what Chuck is saying here, that is in order to know the right thing to do, we have to know ourselves. I had one large global systems integrator that was launching a program, and Marit mentioned this one. And during the launch, the senior vice president was preparing to get on stage and provide the vision for the program. And the vision video was an incredible animation of the end goal, which happened to be getting to Mars. And there was one aspect of his visionary speech that made me a little nervous. He was going to communicate to the audience of aerospace engineers, architects, and developers that the way they were getting compensated was through single lines of code, SLOC. I can hear you all giggling right now. We know as an Agile perspective, that's not the way we want to negotiate our Agile contracts. So now, while this might have been true, the right thing to do would have been some renegotiation around that value, not the SLOC. Well, needless to say, he did have the agency to not communicate this, as it would have had a detrimental impact on the outcomes of the program. So agency in how you show up as a leader could make or break a successful idea or innovation, could make or break those social dynamics that are building it. So let's take a look at some of those social dynamics. The experience I've had with agency and how I've shown up in a scaled Agile environment has been eye-opening. That product manager job I had in the 90s, while it was full of learnings and growth, it didn't generate those lifelong relationships that are still with me today. However, after putting in the personal development work, for me, it was yoga and the practice of yoga. For you, it might look completely different. And moving on in my career, in the 2000s, I could start to see those personal impacts to the social networks in my career. And most of the relationships that I've created after 2000 are still dear friends and still are, even in retirement. So my hypothesis is that it's because I've been a part of a social network of Agilists, of people just like you, that have the same values, and coupled with the work of agency that I've done has created those successes. So let's talk a little bit more about values. Chuck inspired me to read Spiral Dynamics. It's the theory of societal growth. Now, if you've read the book, you'll probably akin it to Don Reinertson's Principles of Product Development Flow, and that you won't get it the first time. I kind of use it as a resource that I go back to. So let me break it down a little bit for you. Spiral Dynamics classified a total of 8 levels of increasingly complex human value systems. They called them VMEMs, and they consisted of a set of sets of worldviews, preferences, and purposes. Now, through these value systems, groups and cultures structured their societies, and then individuals integrated within them. So in short, Spiral Dynamics links the growth of societies through a series of stages that governed both the people and their social structure as they moved up that never-ending neurological evolution that forms empathy. So there's 2 parts of Spiral Dynamics that are super important. And the first is the idea that there can be an orderly progression of values. That people can start at a point of selfishness and low responsibility, as perhaps I did early in my career, and move past that to shared goals and purpose, and a coupling to a higher cause. So yes, we can, and we do evolve. And we see this in our Agile community. We all share a collective mindset around agility, and this brings us together. Now, the second is that given values are associated with a given social structure. And the values of that social structure drive the outcomes that the people in that social structure want. For example, if you organize everyone around a particular value or value stream, and that value stream has a vision and a strategy that's widely communicated and understood, the social structure will evolve to support that vision and strategy. And here's a couple that we're going through globally. Are we aligned to create a vaccine for COVID-19? And are we going to provide that personal protective equipment for humanity worldwide? These are global visions that we can align to today. However, if there's misalignment, and for example, the motivation is money rather than the health and safety of humanity, and everyone's individually motivated, then that egocentric behavior becomes the norm. And we see this in some of our global political settings. Now in January, the Scaled Agile framework released version 5 of the big picture. And if you haven't read up on some of its enhancements, please do, as they've done a phenomenal job in providing guidance on the competencies that help an organization become more lean and eventually achieving business agility. Now, one of the things that I'm particularly fond of is the concept of this dual operating system. Let's see if it is illustrating here. As we scale, we absolutely need to leverage the benefits of a hierarchy. But it's not the hierarchy that provides or develops the network or the social structure. It's the alignment around value that influences the social network that facilitates that flow of value. For me, it's that connective tissue that makes safe work. It's the social fabric. It's the empathetic connective tissue that can leverage the knowledge, the skills, use design thinking and empathy to better address new innovative opportunities. So here's the challenge. As Agile leaders, how do we foster and grow this empathetic fabric so that we can all innovate? Well, as leaders in an Agile organization, I think we all agree it's a mindset and it's based on a series of values and principles. And I can't go into all of them because we know there's at least 4 values. There's dozens of principles if you count the manifesto and SAFe. And there's 7 competencies to achieve business agility. And if you add lean, there's the 5 principles of lean manufacturing. But I'm going to focus on one and the benefits around it. Organize around value is the latest in the SAFe principles. Now, this principle guides the enterprises to align their development efforts around their end-to-end flow of value. So it leverages the benefits of the hierarchy, but it also provides the foundation to build the empathetic network directly organized around value. And that network assembles the people who need to work together, fosters the information flow and knowledge transfer that's truly required to make them a learning organization that can innovate and deliver that value. Now, in my career, I've had the opportunity to organize around value, use design thinking to understand the problem we're trying to solve, and then apply empathy to innovate and create value for our customers. Now, I'm sure you've had that feature or capability that's never been developed. And I had one with one of my organizations, and it involved developing an over-the-air capability through a wireless protocol called Zigbee, which that's now a standard for the open Internet of Things. Now, today, this is a mainstream solution, but at the time, it had never been done before. Now, you could probably imagine asking your developers to create something that's never been created before. What a stressful situation that could have been. But using design thinking and diverging and converging on the problem we were trying to solve while keeping the customer needs in the forefront, our empathetic network of software, firmware, and hardware engineers developed and delivered this technology. And eventually it became the standard for the protocol. Now, this couldn't have happened without having the right people organized around value that could innovate, evolve, and share their knowledge of that problem space, and then deliver something that had never been invented before. That was truly a powerful experience, and that not only showed the social benefits of organizing around value, but also the customer benefits as well. So let's go a little deeper into the science of empathy, and in particular, how you can foster this form of innovation. Let's look at the science of Frans de Waal's work on mapping empathy to neural function. Now, his pyramid around empathy evolution involves emotional contagion, concern for others, and perspective taking. Now, note that as these behaviors evolve in the brain, they're nested within each other. Now, first is emotional contagion. Now, it's also known as mirroring behavior. Most common examples: I cry, I yawn, you yawn. It's a very powerful initiator of the larger cognitive action called modeling behavior, which is the root for role models. So initiation starts here. This is the deepest automatic part of the brain. It's extremely important, and it's embedded deeply in our minds. But with this alone, the results for the empathetic leader trying to communicate complexity and strategy is likely going to fall short. Now, the second is concern for others. One of my favorite quotes is from Maya Angelou, and she said, I've learned that people will forget what you've said, they'll forget what you've done, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Most people associate this with empathy. It's the feeling of experience that exists when two people sit down and communicate through trauma or a happy life experience. Now, the third is perspective taking or cognitive empathy. This is theory of the brain. It's also known as rational empathy. It's the ability to gather information from words, from emotions, from facial gestures, as well as body language to understand how what someone else's perspective is, and then make a predictive assessment on how that person thinks. Now, rational empathy is scaffolded with the below, as I mentioned, alongside the different levels of the neural function associated. Now, this scientific behavior is reinforced by the results of face-to-face planning. Now, I know we're all planning in a virtual world right now, but the rational empathetic experiences I've had with launching international programs and bringing the people together, whether it's virtual or not, have been life-changing. After one large multi-location program launch, I think we had 5 locations, I had a chief architect come to me in tears, look me in the eyes and say, "Thank you for bringing 150 years of collective knowledge together. I now know how to better connect with my peers." Now, I watched this person go through the emotions of connecting through perspective taking and rational empathy over the evolution of the program, and that was truly heartwarming. Now, know that techniques for rational empathy can be taught, as I'm talking through today, but in order for real development of perspective taking and rational empathy, these techniques must be practiced, as the architect in that program did. He practiced. Now, before we continue, let's breathe and soak this in. Rational empathy, how do we show up? After you've identified your value streams, if you were going to organize around value and thus grow your super powerful human neural network around value, how would you do it? I'm going to give you 4 precepts that can help you evolve into an empathetic organization and start to take action. Empathy is both the mechanism and the measure of understanding and synchronizing with each other. And even more powerful, empathy is the connection that allows that knowledge transfer, design thinking, and shared ideas to cultivate and innovate. In essence, empathy rules relationships, and all this provides better outcomes for your enterprise. Now, think of those relationships that you're not close to, and I can think of mine. And honestly, the ones that never evolved had low bidirectional empathy, meaning one of us practiced agency and empathy, and the other one didn't. Now, I had a leader who flat out refused to connect, evolve, and learn, and not only didn't he have the empathy for the Agile learning organization we're trying to create, he didn't have the empathy for me and the work that I valued and delivered. Now, needless to say, after persisting, which we all do, I moved on. So here's some actions for increasing empathy that I've seen work well. Recognize that empathy must be practiced. Model that behavior and model the behavior that you wish to see in your employees throughout your organization as well as your peers. Encourage employees to socialize outside their value stream, and if you can, have all employees of the company participate appropriately in direct customer contact. Now, a great example of this are the SAFE conferences. Since they started in 2013, every employee is invited and encouraged to attend. So in your one-on-ones with your employees, you can experiment with active listening and dialogue exercises to increase your reception and feedback skills. Now, you first might want to experiment with folks that you trust and you care for, and then with people that you don't necessarily interact with on a regular basis. So there's many tools and techniques that get called out in Peter Senge's 5th Discipline field book, such as the action, learning, cycle, and dialogue, and you can use these to help develop your critical reflection skills. Increasing empathy with others requires a higher level of personal insight and reflection. Make sure you're practicing agency. It's hard to give love when you first don't love yourself. Now, for people to open up and connect in meaningful ways, the environment must be safe. I'm sure you've had those leaders that practice safety. They cared and they demonstrated that you as a human mattered. Be that leader that we all want to follow. Observe those attributes and be that leader. Companies that cultivate this safety create the conditions for empathetic connections that are in turn the foundation for an environment that's rich with the creativity and innovation we're all looking for. Some actions for both ensuring safety in your environment and increasing it include ensure transparency and communication of information from the bottom to the top and the top to the bottom. Establish yourself co-equally as a human being and a professional. Now, what this means is letting people connect with you even when you're having a bad day. And understand and be aware of body language. It's the first thing people assess when deciding if the people and the situation is safe. Now, if your organization chart, if your hierarchy represents just roles and reporting guidelines, perhaps as the Scaled Agile framework shows, and people can generate their own connections, then empathy can thrive and your culture can emerge. Even when a social structure is a typical hierarchical stack, if it's surrounded by a network and culture that values different people for all of their differences and encourages its members to connect outside their little nodes, with time, a more empathetic organization will evolve. And over time, that principle of reinforcement, that organizational behavior influences the people to create coherent behavior, and then return the people will in a self-similar fashion influence their organization, that feedback loop will continue. So here's some actions for improving the social structure of your organization. Flatten as much as possible. While it's impossible to truly flatten in a large organization, factor in things like Dunbar's number, which shows the human grouping in relationships kind of maxes out at 150 people. That kind of matters. But the fewer levels of people who need to communicate have to jump, the better they are. Now you can consider your physical architecture. Does your office arrangement match a rigid hierarchy? In other words, how many stairs are there between you as a leader and your people? And are your people rewarded as individuals or as teams? Now, people, of course, are assigned to an organization as an individual, but instead of having individual bonuses, distribute them on as a flat basis as you possibly can, recognizing that different people across an organization can often go unrecognized. And then finally, back to spiral dynamics, the levels of empathy are tied to different values. As we proceed up that empathetic evolutionary scale, our values are going to change. For example, survival values may mean fighting your brother or sister over that glass of water or a candy bar. And on the total end of the other spectrum, global holistic values create concern for people combating COVID-19 around the world. Now, using agency and your reflective awareness and the self-empathy it requires means a divorce between yourself and your egocentric behavior and having a greater attempt at empathizing with others. This has a profound effect on your bottom line, and it's good for your customers, and it's good for this planet. Let's close your eyes one more time and breathe again and focus on one of those precepts that might resonate with you. What if you can't? What if you just can't do all this? It sounds like a lot. Take baby steps. Start with yourself. Start with agency. Any small step you can take towards becoming a more empathetic individual is going to help create the foundation for empathy within your organization. Okay, here's where it gets real, and especially in today's situation. It doesn't stop with your organization. We're here because we've been blessed by a planet that can sustain life. And as we know it, our world's in jeopardy. So as Lynn Twist states in her book, The Soul of Money, for too long, the economy has been viewed as separate from ecology. But nature has showed us that the two are inextricably joined. In fact, the economy is a subset of ecology. Social responsibility has become a huge aspect for this entire planet and the economy that takes from it. What steps can you take to make your organization more socially responsible and practice empathy beyond the organization at the local, at the regional, and global levels? According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, the combined market cap of the world's 100 largest companies topped $21 trillion. $21 trillion. Now, Lynn Twist would recognize that amount of money holed up in those organizations as a blocker of flow. And Don Reinertson would hate that. Even more so, how can we rebalance some of this wealth, create the agency that inspires companies to give back, not through some wealth taxes that some governments would tout, but through the sheer desire and passion of our earth and the empathetic will of the organizations? Now, given the time and the evolutionary practice that we've been discussing here, anyone can approach the world with this collective mindset. And we're starting to see our enterprises do the same. Imagine if all of the enterprises gave back a portion of their profits to humanity and the health of this earth. Imagine if that was knitted into the purpose of each and every organization down to the employee level. Now, there's hope, and enterprises are aligning to this global holistic value, as well as adapting to change real time. So never in our lifetimes has the alignment of global holistic values and our agile value of adapting to change been more important than now. Now, there's two companies that I've had the honor of working for that have done this in different ways. ScanAgile is a member of Pledge 1%, and Pledge 1% believes that all companies have the capacity to give. And you can be the driver of this movement and help shift the culture to help companies stand at the forefront of both economic and social change. Now, ScanAgile does this by allowing each employee to have the opportunity to donate their time as well as money. So each team does the same. They come together and donate the time and money, and the value stream spends time volunteering as well as donating a part of the collective profits of the company to a broader cause. And Tendril, the case study in Agile software requirements, one of the stories that I was talking about, is now called Uplight. It's a Series B corporation. Now, certified Series B corporations are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance the profit and purpose. And the good news is that B corporations are accelerating that global culture shift to redefine success in business and build a more inclusive and sustainable economy. I'm going to read to you Uplight's purpose because I think it's quite powerful. Uplight has the ambitious goal of reducing CO2 emissions by more than 100 million metric tons and saving consumers more than $10 billion on their energy bills in the next 5 years. Now, that's the equivalent of removing more than 21 million cars from the road. That's a pretty powerful, global, holistic, socially responsible mission that I'm sure we could all align around. And personally, my newest purpose since retiring is to spend the rest of my years giving back to community in some way and this amazing planet in general. I couldn't have gotten there without the experiences I've been blessed with and the social networks that have helped me evolve as a human being. Now, while you're here on this earth, knowing that we're all impermanent, what can you do? So here's some ideas. Start with leveraging your people. Apply design thinking. Start with empathy. Understand the problem you're trying to solve. Practice agency. And allow the time and space for innovation. Ask powerful questions of your people. What can we do to not only deliver value to our current customers, but evolve that mission and show them that we're committed to the global cause as well? This has been my greatest joy, and it's also the only reason I'm here with you today. I can't bring back those beautiful souls that have been lost in my life, but now my purpose in retirement is to give back to the earth and the people who live on it today. And while I'm here, try to leave it in a better state. Now, I'm just one person, How the heck can I do that? Well, for me, it's showing up here and presenting to you. That's step one. And continuing to evolve this message, innovate, and grow the sharing of this knowledge. So join me sometime in your next virtual meeting. Turn to the person next to you and ask, what inspires you? How are you going to innovate in your life? How are you going to evolve your agency? How do you connect with empathy and try to solve some of these world's challenges? And how can we become more socially responsible as an enterprise? Where are we going to start? Kiitos, Helsinki.
When you feel the world around you spinning out of control.
So thank you, Jennifer, for this really nice talk. I think it kind of the whole online series today, it's been kind of connected in a way that we had Sake's presentation on design thinking, and we have Sari's presentation on how Posti is doing an agile transformation, and she mentioned that Posti is trying to become a carbon neutral. So if you could kind of give an advice to all of the, I know we have lots of coaching companies here present. So what would be the first steps to take as a coaching company to start implementing this? Because I think some of the stuff that you talked through is quite new for us, and it's quite actually interesting, and we want to connect with that. So how should we get started?
I know there's always that step one that is hard. And I always come back to agency. You know, if you can't show up in a way where your heart is open and you're listening and you're really putting yourself in the shoes of what's happening within this organization, it's going to be hard to coach. So reflective awareness is one of the big things. Now, I gave you a few tools in the presentation, and you may or may not have recognized them. One is breathe. You know, you can get in situations where it might be heated conversations, or it's chaotic, or they're dealing with some you know, challenging change. Breathe and listen, and use that reflective awareness. You know, you have the wonderful steps that you can go through. Thierry talked about them, you know, organizing around value, understanding your value streams. That's one of the steps that is going to create the foundation for people to connect eventually. You kind of have to start with that as well until you create that common value, that common vision on where we're going and what we're doing. You know, people are still going to be in their own minds doing their own work. So start there, breathe, use reflective awareness, and understand how your value flows and organize around that.
Yeah. So quite often when we kind of react, we just react, and we don't kind of question where we react. We just kind of take and jump to the conclusions without kind of taking the position of the other person. So that's why the kind of taking a pause and breathing is so important.
Very well said.
So I read recently that there is some companies in the US who have decided to kind of that, you know, sometimes it's said that the companies exist only for the sole purpose of making money for the owners. But now in the US, there is kind of this other amendum written by the big corporations, which we don't have, at least in Europe or in Finland yet. So can you please reflect a little bit on that one as well?
Yeah, that alignment to a higher purpose. Some of the larger organizations are giving back. You know, some of our serial entrepreneurs out there are giving back. You know, one of my role models is Bill Gates. You know, he's spun out a whole part of his corporation to create an organization, a nonprofit, that's sole purpose is to give back to humanity. And he's donating tons of money back to, you know, trying to solve the problem of COVID-19 right now. And those leaders and those companies are inspiring, and hopefully it's going to create that principle of reinforcement that we are in business because of our beautiful planet, and we do have a responsibility to give back. So I don't know all of them out there, but when they show up, I'm truly grateful that they are showing up and that we can use them as examples for ourselves and for our own enterprises.
And one more final question for you. So isn't it so that, well, some people may say that it's our government's duty to kind of help us through the COVID-19, or how can it's kind of what should the corporates or companies do?
If we relied on the government for everything, I think we'd be in a big challenge. I think we need to decentralize control, take control where the money is, and start to give back where we can. And we all have the capability to do that and inspire that. Of course, we need to make profits so that we can grow and pay our people and grow the value to our organization. But that's just part of it. Keeping that money hold up. So for example, that $21 trillion that I mentioned, keeping it hold up isn't doing anybody any good. It's doing nobody good. Let's put that in a place where we can provide good to our planet.
Thank you. Thank you. And we are a little bit over time. So next we would like to invite Hilkka for the closing of this session. So thank you, Jennifer, for the nice presentation.
Thank you.
So Hilkka, can you please join me to the stage?
Yeah, hi, I'm back here.
Hello.
Hi, and the slides are here. So we are closing for the day. We had 4 amazing talks, and you can stay online for after work. So I noticed in the discussion some people wanted to chat with friends, so you can do that afterwards. And if Nika shows this next slide. So the next event will be on 25th of May, and I will add a link to the chat. So you can sign up to the next event already now. And there was the question in the Q&A part. Can I make a session for my colleagues that are not here today? So please let people who were here today or the original ticket buyers to sign up first. So leave them a couple of days and then you can share the link to everyone. We had pretty good amount of people coming. So we had 400 people signing up, and at least when I was following, there was sometimes 270 people, a little bit over 270 people online. So, so please treat your signing up as binding. We have more room for the next session, but so that everyone who really wants to get in and was originally coming to the original event gets to come. And yeah, and it was an amazing session. So thank you everyone for joining us. And we will send you an email. And then I would still once more thank our sponsors. There's still sponsoring opportunities in case your employer wants to sponsor the event. And we still take private sponsors too. Thank you, everyone. And when you get off the session, you